My name is Alex.
My name is Alex.
And our favorite show is
Jane the Virgin.
Jane the Virgin. The plot centers around a Latina college student, Jane Villanueva, whose medical files get mixed up with some evil witch, Petra Solano, causing her to get accidentally artificially inseminated with another man's sperm.
Are you ready for your insemination?
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm a little tired.
You're pregnant.
I'm a virgin.
The idea of getting your medical records switched is not only insane, but dangerous. However, this happens in real life more than you think. The United States is a world leader in medicine and has created half of the world's new medicine over the last decades. In order to test the effectiveness and safety of medical treatments on humans, medical researchers will conduct clinical trials. However, for a country made up of a variety of cultural and ethnic backgrounds, participants in clinical trials are overwhelmingly white. White people make up 93% of clinical trial participants, while minorities only fill up the other 7%. In a population consisting over 30% of African and Mexican Americans, it's crazy that they only make up 3% of clinical trial participants. Due to the lack of racial diversity in clinical trials, researchers are unaware that minorities will not respond the same way or at all to medicine created for white genes. The most universally prescribed asthma treatment is Alberto. It's a thingy that you attach to your inhaler.
Street, in competition, a man confronts you.
According to the National Center of Health Statistics, African Americans are 3 times more likely to die of asthma than their white counterparts. Even though African Americans are most susceptible to asthma, Alberto is ineffective in half of African Americans. In comparison, Alberto is ineffective in only 20% of Dutch kids. It's been proved in research that African Americans don't respond the same way as whites do to common asthma medicine and are even dying because of it. But we still don't include them while researching cures. And it's not just African Americans and asthma. 86% of Asian Americans have a genetic trait that makes them hypersensitive to warfarin, the most common drug to prevent blood clotting, and it puts them at risk of excessive bleeding with doses normally prescribed to whites. In a study that adjusted for all socioeconomic and environmental factors, African Americans were still 40% more likely to die of cancer than white women. But African Americans still only represent 1.3% of cancer clinical trial participants. Sus. I know! Even though they were receiving equal care, the survival gap between whites and African Americans were significant. The numbers show that race and ethnic background do have an important role in determining how someone responds to a drug. Oakley Gervin, a researcher from the Cancer Prevention Institute of California, says, research has shown that some ethnic groups have different responses to medications, making it critical for people of all races and ethnicities to be involved in clinical trials. But hold the phone. How do you even define race? Race is just a social construct that needs to discriminate, marginalize, and exploit. In American history and the present day, race is used to justify slavery and segregation by defining race with physical traits, not biological ones. Many critics like Otis Brawley, the chief medical officer for the American Cancer, point out that all humans are 99% identical, and race is simply a social categorization, not a biological one. During the abolitionist movement in 1830 led to the rise of Negro medicine, a series of efforts to find evidence that African Americans were inherently inferior and evolved from a different species to justify slavery and racism. Just recently, Pearson Education, the leading education publisher, issued a recall and apology for nursing books that stated that African Americans reported higher pain intensity. So, is race real? Race is really just a crude proxy and substitution word for a combination of genetic diversity, environmental factors, access to healthcare, socioeconomic status, and more. Even though race is based on physical traits, there is no denying that we are all genetically diverse. Through the course of human evolution, humans have gone through microevolution to help them adapt to their environment. For example, lactose tolerance is a trait that evolved in Western and European countries, but not in most Asian countries. But ethnicity can be defined in both socially and biologically. On our SAT tests, college applications, medical surveys, ethnicity is grouped into 7 main categories. In our medical field specifically, it is inappropriate to lump everyone from the giant continent of Asia or Africa as one ethnicity when they are genetically diverse. For example, the ethnic group Asian Americans consists of totally separate cultural groups who live in totally different environments like Chinese, Cambodian, and Vietnamese who all have different genetic makeup. For example, the Chinese have a lower risk of heart disease compared to Asian Indians, despite being in the same generalized ethnic group. Even further, the Chinese population has over 550 recognized ethnicity groups. Access to healthcare, environmental exposures like pollution, and cultural factors are all factors determining how someone reacts to medicine. The lack of research on minorities can also be pointed to the fact that both color scientists and diseases that disproportionately affect minorities, like sickle cell anemia in Blacks, remain underfunded.